Jillian's here because she's been able to maintain $50,000 plus in her bank account at all times with a project-based service business. It can be tremendously challenging to manage cash flow with a full team
Mhm.
and projects. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Harmonious Wealth. I am your host, Iyanna Vaughn, and I have a very, very special guest. We have Jillian Smith-Austin, one of our amazing clients of One Touch Events. Hey, Jillian, thank you for coming on.
Hi, Ayana. I am super excited to be here and to talk all things money.
Yes, yes. So tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Sure. So I'm the founder and creative director of One Touch Events. We are a event planning firm based in Atlanta, Georgia, but we service clients worldwide. Most of our events are conference, social, nonprofit. It's very few events that we don't do, but we are selective in the events that we do produce.
Oh, I love it. And y'all are like the best in the game when it comes to producing like well-crafted events. And just because I've attended conferences that you all have run and like the way that y'all execute is phenomenal and like your team is amazing. So I definitely want to shout that out.
For shouting that out because not only as we're your client, but you have been able to see us in action, and that's sometimes part of the mystery of like, should we hire an event planning firm? Or we've had bad experiences with event planners that I feel like we have a secret sauce that resonates to every attendee as well as our clients that continue to come back to us.
That gets me to thinking of like, how did you get started with event planning? I bet you were like really organized growing up. So how did that turn into business?
Yeah, so the quick story is I am a holiday baby. So my birthday is on
Mm.
Christmas. So I've always been around celebrations. But to your point, I was the organized friend. I was the trustworthy student. Maybe I was a teacher's pet. I don't know. But I also was involved in a lot of organizations growing up, in the church as well as in school and, community, Girl Scouts and all that. So just being in a position where I was involved in events just turned into something that I love to do. I was always the one that wanted to plan the Christmas party for my birthday because I wouldn't be able to have a birthday party. And as you grow up, you have your same friend circles that life starts to happen. And so we're planning the baby showers and the birthday parties, the bachelorette parties. So that events have always been a part of my life, even though it's not my core skill set. But a lot of what I learned as an IT consultant is relatable. And the passion of, being in a spirit of service all kind of like beautifully coincided into creating this business of One Touch Events.
I love that. And it's funny because your birthday is December 25th, of course, Christmas, right? And what's funny, my daughter's birthday is January 2nd. So I was asking you advice like years ago. I'm not sure if you remember of like, how do you celebrate a child whose birthday is like right on the holiday?
No, and it's always, like, and I think that's it. Everything comes with intentionality. So my mother was very intentional about making sure that I didn't feel othered or just looped in with, it's just the holidays. Because I have
Right.
friends that, were born on Christmas Eve and then New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, where we had a certain part of Christmas Day that was all things Christmas. And then after my birth time, that was my birthday. So my gifts and my birthday cake, everything came and looked like a birthday event versus Christmas. So that was the intentionality where I never felt like, oh, I have to share my day with everybody else plus Jesus. But I felt like, it still was my day.
That is incredibly thoughtful of your mom to like form or your family to form that because I've never heard of that, but it's so intentional.
Be like, well, your birthday's in on Thanksgiving, or, it's December the 29th. Special day, let it be that day and not be like, well, your Christmas gifts is your birthday. No, keep it separate.
Speaking of growing up, how was your relationship with money?
Well, money, the conversation about money was always in our household, maybe not in the way that as we grew into adulthood that I would have liked for our conversation about money. So growing up, Birmingham, Alabama, smallish town, big town in Alabama, but small in comparison. I have always had a piggy bank. I started with a piggy bank, still have that same piggy bank. I would
My
put it out, but
goodness.
we only have so much time. My parents had a store when I was growing up, and I've always been around commerce, some type of it was a neighborhood store, like a convenience store or a bodega, depending on where you're from. So I grew up in that store, and part of like being the youngest grandchild, being in that store, I had my first job was greeting, but also I had a side hustle. Didn't know it was a side hustle, but I went to a Bible school and I knew the 66 books of the Bible and I had a song with it. And that's how I used to make money is
What?
writing the books of the Bible.
My goodness.
Bank full of like these silver dollars and like coins that are out of commission now. I still have those because it was like all the old people would be like, "Oh, she's so cute. Here goes a coin." But I always learned to save because I had a piggy bank. And then as I got older in middle school, my next set of learning about money or how to maneuver what my money story would be, my father, he was very adamant on if you want something, you got to go out there and get it. Like, I'm going to give you what you need, but if what you want, you got to work for it. So my first job was I was like maybe seventh grade, and there was like a program at our church where you learned a trade. That was a way to get the kids off the streets. So I learned how to sew and I made money doing that. And then, enter into high school just to give like y'all know how old I am. I wanted a pager so bad. Parents were not gonna buy me a pager because they said that is for drug dealers. So I was like, I really want one. So he was like, you want one? You got to go get a job. So I got my work permit because I wasn't old enough to have a job. You had to get a permit.
Right,
And
right.
I started working so I could save up. I always had a fund. But
Mm,
another twist to that money story was always tithing.
mm,
Grew up in the AME church, so tithing was, that was ingrained in me as a child. And then I also had to pay rent. I paid rent to my dad, $7 a week. Because it coincided with my paycheck. So I worked at Baskin
ah,
Robbins. That was my first like real W-2 job in high school. In addition to, like I was balancing it off, still worked it out. But we got paid weekly. So that was I had to pay rent. So it was
oh
$7
my goodness.
a week that I paid to my dad. I had my savings account, I had my tithing. So my relationship with money was always about like whatever you want, you have to save. And then you can get the things that you want, but make sure that you're taking care of your bills. So that's kind
Mm,
of where my money story started. And then just a shout out to my dad. My rent,
mm.
he didn't use it. He saved it up, and that was something he gave to me when I went to college.
I am floored. That is amazing. I'm over here every word. I'm like, wow, that is so cool. And so again, intentional. That's like your parents played such a role in who you are today, but like the things that they've instilled in you, even if it's what at the time was like small, it's
Yeah.
monumental.
Not write it down. I mean, because like the money amount may
Yeah.
be different based on generational, of course, and where we are today, but the principles still remain, like saving, spending, being mindful, and all of that. So that's where the story started. And then of course, as you get older, you start kind of doing your own thing, like, gosh, credit cards.
Right. The world gets to us.
Yeah. They told me about that. Nobody told me about investing. So that's where I was, like what I say, the conversations were very heavily on the saving,
Mm,
you paying your bills off. We didn't talk about investing. We didn't talk about,
right.
other than pay everything off with cash, we didn't talk about how can credit be utilized to be a benefit. It was always looked at as don't get a credit card debt. So those are some of the
Right.
conversations that I like to have with those that are, up and coming, learning their financial story. So it's like, let's start having that conversation early because it can happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm over here thinking about like your relationship sounds secure. When it comes to insecure,
Hmm.
you might feel avoidant
Yeah.
where you don't look at your money or you're afraid to look at your money or even anxious when you're trying to like over control it or like spend it before you think it's going to be gone. So it's amazing that you have that foundation of security in your finances and you've been able to kind of bring that into your adulthood, of course. Things get a little hectic, but you have the firm foundation. So
Yeah.
and speaking of like foundations, before we worked together, how did you feel about like your money management with your business?
So that's a great it's like the juxtaposition of I was very adamant and focused on the saving, like I had my first checking account in high school so I could cash my check. So I was always very regimented in terms of tracking. But as you kind of get into you're pulling away from your parents and getting into adulthood, as much as I had security, I also had the insecurity of
Mm.
cash flow or just making sure that, I never wanted to have to be put out on the street. Like I always looked at the extremes.
Right, worst case scenario.
Always the extreme is like, yeah, we're living in abundance. Now I'm living on the street. So it's like, where did that come from? So, but with that, I was, tracking. But as I started to get into more so on the business side versus personal finance, it was always hard for me to really wrap my head outside of my bills. Like, how could I maneuver to ensure that I was placing enough into my 4K when I worked in corporate or, other investments. And it didn't feel as secure because, again, like these are things I can't control. I can control what I put into these accounts, but now there's a money management account and these stocks and everything that goes up and down. Like that became the insecurity. And, 2008, I just saw my 401k go like, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not giving them anything." Because that was like my first time being a part of a recession and with layoffs during that time. So my security story started to shift because of life
Mm,
and just not being able to control. I'm also December 25th. I'm a Capricorn.
mhm.
If you can't control it, it makes you very cautious. So that started to become my story until I started to really educate myself and get the right people around me to help support the thing that I didn't know.
Uncertainty in business versus having a 9 to 5 and getting your paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
When it comes to service-based business owners, especially with project-based business owners, what was that timing when you're like, "All right, now I need some support in managing the finances because things are growing or all these moving pieces." What was that time like for you?
So I waited longer than I should have. We can
Mm,
start there. Part of it is control freak. I got this. I know how to balance. I know how to open account. I know how to have things deposited. Like, why do I need someone to tell me what to do? So I waited longer than I should have. But to that point, I needed to work with a financial organization and also a coach that understood like after the project ends, that's it. So what does that need to look like in terms of like recurrent revenue? But then also pricing strategies. So again, like I was just, in the air, like, okay, yeah, let's charge 2,000 for this and let's charge 8,000 for that. Didn't even know like if I charge 8,000 for this and put it here, and then I can pay, my virtual assistant, and then I can pay for all our software, and then I maybe have a little bit left over for myself because I want to make sure everyone was always taken care of before me. So that was another realization after working with that level of guidance of, at some point you need to pay yourself first. And I made the biggest mindset shift when I read Mike Michalowicz with Profit First.
mhm.
That's when I started making that shift. Like, okay, every single bucket that I already had, I needed to expand on it, but I also needed to be strategic with the percentages that needed to go into those buckets to make sure that the business
Right.
continued to thrive.
Before working with us, where were you in your business? I know you mentioned you waited a little bit too long, but what was that tipping point of like, "All right, let's just go ahead and reel it in?"
Yeah, that tipping point was after working with my second business coach, and she was working at a level that I wanted to aspire to. So how do I
Mm,
get there? And part of it was you do need to work with someone outside of just your tax accounting. And I think we started working together. Just I was like, somebody needs to do these taxes. Again, I used to do it all myself. I was doing my taxes 1040 easy in high school, college. And somebody at my church was like, "Oh, you're gonna go into accounting like me?" I was like, no, I just want to get my refund quick." I got to a point where it was so complicated. And I was like, I am not an accountant. I don't want to be a tax accountant. Work with a professional to do that. I went through a few before I came to you. And part of just understanding who I needed to work with was someone that understood the type of business we work with companies, but just didn't understand how our cash flow goes. They really didn't understand it. So I felt like I probably still got the government still owe me money because I was paying every year. It wasn't like until we started getting to an advisement standpoint. Once I left full time and went full time with my business and started working with Lovely Financials, I would say that was about that 5-year mark. So that's
Mm.
where it really, like, if I would have started in the beginning, even if it was small advisement and working my way up, I could have been, more equipped as we started to grow. But I was kind of was hitting hit a hard growth cycle. That's when, I was like, yeah, somebody else got to do this.
And just for context, everyone who's listening, years ago, we were doing tax prep. And when I say Jillian was my favorite, hands down, tax client, we were so
Love
organized, receptive. It was just like chef's kiss. I'm like, literally, because, just making sure the books are good, making sure everything is there. But there was no question of like, I need to chase you for any data. Nope. Jillian has it, even down to the donations. Okay. Every single thing.
every single shoestring that got the I want my $3 for those shoestrings that I donated.
If more people were like you, I would continue to do taxes, but it's no
Mm-mm.
longer in my ministry.
I understand. I overstand because, like I said, I don't ever want to do my taxes ever.
Oh my goodness. And then we started to work together with like bookkeeping, and then it expanded on like profit planning, cash flow management, things like that. One of the things that is important for service-based business owners, especially project-based, is understanding like your busy seasons and your slower seasons. I know we talked about like after we were working through Profit First, you had an iteration of Profit First, and then we kind of elevated it together. How was that? How was going through like busy versus slow seasons with you after we've kind of set up the cash flow system together?
Ooh, yes. Again, it was night and day. What my understanding, because it takes a while and, seasonality is a thing in service based businesses where, I knew when our lulls were. Once we moved into a more formal process for the cash flow management, I never felt like I had a lull. There was always, like there was the flow of like, yes, we are usually slower in the wintertime. So we plan for that in advance. Had to stop being as rigid with our payment process for our clients. So it used to be like 50% down, 50 at the end, or 25, 25, 50. We had to like make sure that we knew what our slow seasons were and then make those edits so that I could ensure that there was always cash flow. And I didn't have that mentality or that process until we started really getting into that profitability conversation.
And speaking of the profitability conversation, when we would look over, and just for reference, Jillian's here because she's been able to maintain $50,000 plus in her bank account at all times with a project based service business. It can be tremendously challenging to manage cash flow with a full team and projects. And then with those projects, you incur expenses to execute on those projects. So to be able to manage your cash in a way that's kind of automated at this and
Yeah.
still growing and thriving is a tremendous feat that you've been able to kind of go through. So I just want to give you your flowers.
That's something that I don't do enough of is to sit back and just
Yeah.
think about like how much we've grown and how, the business has changed to a point operationally that I feel comfortable with. I'm just always just going and going and going. And I was like, yeah, I did that.
Right.
We're doing that. And we can continue to do that as long as we keep the momentum ensuring that we have the operational prowessness, the right teams in place to support us, but then also just ensuring what we know about the market and shifting, because I think that's still another part of the wealth conversation or just the profitability conversation that doesn't get talked about enough is that like we're gonna have to continue to we can't get stagnant, and that's where I feel like we can continue to like ensure that we're keeping that, I say that 50,000 plus and making sure that all of our team members are paid, our bills are paid, and then there's a little bit for a Christmas party at the end of the year.
Right.
because we are staying ahead of the changes.
That is so good. Speaking of the changes, right? What would you consider like a good month now versus before when we created these systems?
Gotcha. So a good month now versus what I used to think was a good month is everything is automated. I used
Mm,
to be very much, I need to press the button to make sure that I press the button for the payment. Now that we have a payroll system. It used to be, let me make sure that I pay everyone first. Let me see what
mm,
I have left. I don't actually have anything left for myself. A good month now that has been tracking, and Lord continue, is that I don't have to push the button. It's or in a review process, like we get our payroll report. I'm not even looking at it. My business manager is looking at it and can look and tell, and it's just like, yeah. And then a good month, we don't have to worry about if the money's in the bank to make payroll. So that is a good month now versus previous. It was like, yeah, we made a lot of money. I don't know where it went. Now we know where it's going.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about CEO salary.
CEO salary. CEO salary feels so great. It feels like now I what I used to miss in terms of, oh, that guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks at in my 9 to 5, I have that every 2-week paycheck. I know what's coming. So it doesn't have to shift like, oh, I pay myself 5 grand this month and next month I'm paying myself 1,200 because I ain't have it. Like now it is consistent and that's what it feels like.
And speaking of like everything being automated, we've switched over to the banking system, Relay Bank. We're going to shout you out, Relay Bank. We love Relay, and it does like automated transfers. And it's like you don't even have to worry about what's getting done.
Right. Yeah,
Ooh,
I used to do all of that again, this is why I'm your A++ client, but I used to do my percentages, I wrote them out. So Relay has been a great software partner to be able to fuel our operations the way that I was manually doing it before.
well, the financial strategy that we created, how has it changed the way that you make business decisions?
So now I look at, well, you probably can't see it, but in the mirror, there's a whiteboard there. I'm a millennial, so I like to write, but I like to type at the same time. Visually, that whiteboard has now turned into is a title that it says lock in and go.
I love that. It's like continuing the momentum and
Yes.
not getting complacent. You have the cash flow that's comfortable, and it's like, all right, what's next? You can bring in more business, and then also like your future vision. What does that look like for you?
So we all kind of change our titles.
Right.
When I moved from CEO or owner to CEO to founder and
Mm,
creative director, what the future looks like for us is for me to pull into more as an advisory and then just director versus the executor. So sometimes I do
mm,
still need to get in and get into the weeds, but my role is to go out and network, market, advise on, the events that we currently have. So that's where building out a team that can just run with it and you're running the one touch way. It's not like, oh, we don't have Jillian on like you have Jillian infused because I did build this business, but we have a team in place that can manage all of those different portfolios with our aesthetic and the type of clients we work with versus being in the weeds. So that's what I
right.
envision going into the future.
I love that. When we talk every quarter and when we do our profit planning, hearing what your vision is or what the next step is for your company. Speaking of like profit planning, how has that been working together of like one, understanding what the financials are saying, the story behind it, and then also like planning for profit in your business? How has that been working together?
It's been a great, I say a push and pulls. Working with you and your team first, just showing me all of my numbers, because sometimes I do still want to pull back. So I'm not so like, okay, let me look at this every day, but
Right,
being
right.
able to look at it holistically, but in a reporting standpoint of, okay, so profitability, like where we were from our expense to revenue ratio, learning that and being able to understand it. Cause I still feel like a lot of companies, small businesses, or even large businesses, they don't understand like their numbers.
Right.
And for a long time, I was afraid to, without saying I was afraid to, but it was just like, I just don't understand.
Mhm.
And you have helped to, to bridge that gap, not in a, not so technical way so that we could understand, but then also visually and being open to the questions, like I asked the question, I was like, well, what does this mean? Or maybe we need to like revamp like our categories because you and your team understanding our business. So it wasn't just like blanketed, this is just your P&L. Like it's a P&L for touch. And I felt like other accounting firms are just focused on the numbers without knowing the business
Mm.
as much as possible, as well as understanding who they're talking to. So that education has been helpful. And as we got into like that next level of like, I'm just going to show everyone, I have like this little sticky note because I have written things all over the place. So this sticky note shows me what I want our 2025 financial goals. And that was based off of our year end 2024. And I was like, "Oh, no, we about to kill that because I don't like that number." Look like? What do we need to do? And working in partnership to understand what is the next step to get to those goals for 2025 has been beneficial of working together to really have like those, I don't want to say hard conversations, but those strategic conversations that then I can pass down to our business manager and say, hey, this is what we collectively we're doing. So it's not just in my head, but she's also saying, she's like, I don't know if this is a best fit for us, or let's go after this.
Mhm.
So being able to bring in your team as well has been helpful to like just continue to expand.
I love that because when it comes to growing our businesses, it's like we feel selective on what to share and what not to share with our team. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that because you have that confidence, you're able to then be transparent because you've built a team that you trust
Yeah.
with your vision and you can share it. And then for you to get that feedback of like, I don't know, it's like, oh, that's great. And that means you
Yeah,
know the
exactly.
culture.
Yeah, that's been one of, like I would say refreshing because when you start solo dolo, essentially, like you are one on one. I'm just talking to myself. And some still like to work in that way and
Yeah,
no
yeah.
knock to them, but it's helpful to have other perspectives because we get so ingrained in our own dogma that we're like, nobody else can tell me what to do and this, that, and a third. But then you see that you're not growing and then you're
Mm,
undercutting other folks just so that you can win some business. And I wanted to give those collaborative opportunities because I don't know it all. And I want someone to tell me, hey, well, how about this? What if we thought about it this way?
yeah. And that gets me to what you were saying. A lot of people in your industry don't necessarily know their numbers. And I feel like we had a conversation before about like profit margins based off of industry. And
Yeah.
because we look at the numbers specific to One Touch,
Mhm.
with the categories, we're able to break industry norms because we're able to then understand profit margins or like the cost versus the total sale and really get intricate with the numbers. How does that feel to kind of like break industry standards or make your own standard for your company because you know the numbers?
Right. It feels at first it felt, I was apprehensive, and you can say that. You could say Jillian was like, I don't know if we could charge that much, and it's just like because like what we know that others with similar processes, similar years in business, what they're charging, and I know how much I pay my team. I know how much the team is paid because they're going to get paid well. I know
Right.
how much all of our expenses of the things that we need, like everything can't be free. I can't be on the free account for everything. Like some of
Mm,
them have to
that
be,
part.
we got to get at least the classic level that's $15 a month. But understanding all of that really, and then just knowing that, we harmonious, and we talking about, like I don't want to say the wrong words, but essentially knowing that we can back up our investment because I know how much we need to charge in terms of
That
like
part.
our payroll, our expenses, the profitability margins. Every once in a while, you are taking on something and you're like, yep, we ain't making any money from that. But we made a really great connection, so sometimes you have to weigh those opportunities as well. So that's been, as we've broken out of some of those, like we're not in the same ballpark as some of the others. I feel more confident because I know our numbers. I can't say that they don't know their numbers. Maybe they have a trust fund. I don't know. But I
Right.
know I can't charge what they charge because we charge this, and if you don't book it as a client, there are others that are cheaper or more expensive, you know?
Right. I'm so glad you mentioned that because something that I'm creating a name for it.
Mhm.
So you mentioned that we do like a debrief based off of like different projects and we
Mhm.
know the profitability per project.
Yeah.
And so now we've implemented it. We have a name. It's called Profit Debrief. And then we're going to also implement something new where it's kind of like a margin mirror. And we're kind of like seeing a reflection of, okay, not only are we talking about numbers, but like, how did it feel? When you mentioned about like the connection, right? That's like a nuanced experience that you probably wouldn't talk about on
Right.
like a typical accountant conversation or a typical conversation when you're like looking at the numbers, but like piecemealing it. I'm like, oh, the benefit was X, Y, and Z, this connection, right? And that connection can lead to something so much greater as well. But it's like if we talk about it and we know the why and how you felt behind it, it kind of like all inclusively kind of meshes together.
That. We get so, like, regimented, like, this they're not charging if we're not charging this or we're not able to make that, like, we have to look beyond. I mean, the numbers are important, but looking beyond, like,
Right.
are the what's the opportunities that could be there? I mean, we may take on a client and we're like, "Yep, still what me there was no connection." But, like, you could have taken on something that had 0 profitability, but it has so many other opportunities down the line. So
Right.
that's where, like, that was another mindset shift, but also financial shift to like, it's just like, oh, well, I guess we really should have charged this, but it's like, no, but after executing this event for this 5-figure investment, we got a 6-figure investment because we talked to 3 people and we were able to book 3 different clients off of that one small event? So yeah.
I love that. It could get so intricate. We could geek out about it
Yeah.
all day.
Right.
Okay, a lot of people think, I have a bookkeeper or I have like my tax accountant. I should be good, right? But I'm kind of not big on titles. It's kind of hard to title what we do, but like if someone thinks that they're fine with specifically just getting their books done or getting their taxes done, what would you say to them as they're growing their business?
So I would recommend, I mean, you definitely need to ensure that your taxes are all together. The bookkeeping, if you're looking at that monthly or quarterly, yep, keep it. To scale, you need to have the conversation with whatever the title, to your point, whatever the title is about how do I get to that next level? For example, it was time for us to go into an S corp. I
Right.
didn't know what that needed to look like. I've heard of it, and I was just like, I'm never gonna get there. And I got there way quicker than I thought I did.
Yes, I remember. I was like, okay, we
Yeah,
gonna get there.
scary, of course, because it's like, okay, well, that means that there is a base level of the income that's coming in every year. I was like, can I do that? And I have. But those are conversations that you don't have when it's just your taxes, just your bookkeeping.
Right.
But if you are ambitious in your business, having those next level of conversations, just like with personal finance, like I want to do more outside of my 401k or my SEP IRA or whatever. You go to
Mhm.
that next level of an investment strategy. So you would want to do the similar for your business on the financial strategy.
Mm. I love that you said the word financial strategy because shameless plug, Jillian is a part of our financial strategy experience services. And, we blend, the bookkeeping with profit planning. And that goes into financial strategy of like, how do you actually reach your goals? But has been an amazing conversation. I have a final question, something I ask all my guests.
Okay.
How would you define harmonious wealth for yourself?
So the word harmony feels like well balanced to me. I don't know what the Oxford Dictionary definition is for harmony or harmonious, but harmonious wealth to me feels the feeling I feel good about our money story, personal and professional. So personal finance, because we have those conversations too, Ayana, but ensuring that what I have built and continue to build, not only for myself, but for my team, feels like it feels good all the way around. And the wealth, again, is not just the dollar amount, it's the feeling for us. Yeah, we want the coins in the bank, ones that fold and not make the noise. We also wanna feel good that the work that we're doing, we're getting paid fairly. We can use that to have, the balance of life outside of work. So that's what harmonious wealth feels and means to me.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jillian. This has been an amazing conversation. Like, I was surprised pleasantly and like the different stories that you shared, and I thoroughly appreciate you being so open. And any last bit of advice that you have for any business owners as they're scaling, or any last thoughts?
Yeah, so one of my something that worked really well for me didn't come as a advisement from any of my business coaches, but something I just learned on my own is as much as we have an industry that you kind of want to stay within the same kind of realms, put the blinders on. We oftentimes get into analysis paralysis. We are, coveting. We are comparing. We have imposter syndrome, keeping our eyes on our own paper, being aware, but keeping our eyes on our own paper and really focus on how you want your business to grow. You will continue to grow without having to compare yourself or try to stay into a certain race that you were already well ahead and you just didn't know it. So that would be my business advice.
Love that. It's like just it's kind of like drink your water, mind your business. Okay.
Yeah, like, stay hydrated, stay prayed up.
Exactly.
We just gonna keep on going. I can't worry about what, this planning company is doing or this firm is doing over here. Let's keep
Right.
our eyes on the road and we stay booked and busy because of it.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. So, Jillian, where can people find you?
Yes, we are One Touch Events LLC on all platforms. We spend a lot of time on our Instagram, but you can find
Mhm.
me personally on LinkedIn, as well as on Instagram, One Touch Events LLC.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jillian.
Thank you.